What would you do if the man who represents everything wrong with the world fell into your hands, sick and vulnerable? This is the story of Anya, the nurse who walked away from Wall Street out of moral conviction. When finance titan Elijah Thorne became her patient, he scorned her work, until he discovered that the only person who understood the billion-dollar crisis crashing down on him was her. From that moment on, the battle for the survival of Elijah's empire became a battle for the redemption of his soul. And the nurse would make sure that social justice was the ultimate price. If you've ever felt like your value and hard work are overlooked, hit the like button and subscribe to dive into this epic story where a nurse's assistant's ethics challenge the greed of Wall Street. You will want to know how she used a secret family finance trick to change his life, and the lives. The air in the presidential suite of St. Jude's Hospital didn't smell like antiseptic. It smelled like money and loneliness. The tempered glass of the panoramic window, which overlooked the imposing Manhattan skyline, acted as a transparent barrier, separating Elijah Thorne, 37, from the financial empire he, lying there, controlled from afar. His illness, a persistent fever and an exhaustion that even his elite medical staff could not fully diagnose, wasn't just physical, it was a metaphor for the stagnation he felt. Accustomed to closing 8-figure deals before breakfast, he now found himself confined, watching the frenetic drama of the city as if it were a silent film. Elijah was the principal heir to Thorne Investments, a name that on Wall Street was synonymous with cold marble and ruthless decisions. His posture, even reclined against Egyptian cotton sheets, maintained a forced elegance. He wore silk pajamas that cost more than most hospital workers' monthly salaries, but his expression was one of profound frustration and latent moral conflict. He wasn't just sick, he was bored to the point of cruelty. The luxury of the room, with its dark wood paneling and abstract art on the walls, was his golden cage. He felt an urgent need to test the boundaries of the environment, to exert some kind of control over the only thing that still moved in his world, the people who came and went in silence. His frustration focused on the incessant routine, the hushed voices, and the anonymous faces that served his recovery. He viewed everyone, from nurses to technicians, as set pieces, as elements that should perform their functions with the same predictable efficiency as a financial algorithm. He saw them, but he didn't perceive them, as if they were invisible by design. It is into this setting of opulence and apathy that Anya Volkov enters. At 28, Anya was a certified nursing assistant, CNA, and her job was the least glamorous and most essential part of care. Hygiene, comfort, constant and silent monitoring. Her uniform, a shade of deep scarlet, contrasting with the white and gray of the room, was almost a symbol of the quiet passion she had for her work, but also of her humble status in that microcosm. Anya did not move with the nervous haste of the other nurses. She had a deliberate rhythm, a calmness that seemed to absorb the anxiety around her. Her medium-length wavy hair was pulled back, and her makeup was neutral. She wasn't there to be noticed, but to serve. However, there was something in her expression that set her apart, a tranquil yet deeply attentive gaze. She did not display the reverent fear that some staff members exhibited in the presence of the famous and demanding Elijah Thorne. That day, Anya entered the room for the afternoon shift. She was there for a routine vital signs check and to ensure he took his medications. The millionaire watched her with calculated indifference as she checked the infusion pump. For Elijah, she was the personification of the hard work he never had to do. He saw the uniform blouse with a faded patch and thought of the mile-long social distance that separated them. His mind, always seeking leverage, tried to find a breach in the armor of Anya's calmness. "Miss Volkov." Elijah's voice was low, but laced with polished sarcasm. "Could you please adjust the angle of this screen? It's obstructing my view of my own failure." Anya turned, unfazed by the irony. "Certainly, Mr. Thorne. Anything else?" Her voice was clear and devoid of unnecessary emotion, almost like an echo. This lack of reaction, this stoic professionalism, was what most irritated Elijah. He craved a sign of subservience, a hint of awe. He wanted her to recognize him not just as a patient, but as a financial titan. Boredom and frustration led him to want to break this serenity. He was about to launch the first arrow of his character test, a move to remind her where each of them truly fit on the great social ladder. He braced himself for the joke, feeling the tip of cruelty slide onto his tongue. He leaned forward slightly, what was meant to be a smug smile looking more like a tense grimace. His eyes, which usually scrutinized balance sheets, now scrutinized the young assistant. It was time to prove his point, to reintroduce hierarchy into the room. And so, the trap was set, waiting only for the silent completion of a medication chart to be sprung. Anya stood by the bedside, checking the IV flow, her body leaning with calm concentration. The tips of her fingers brushed Elijah's skin for a brief, cold, purely clinical instant as she adjusted the catheter. A touch that to him was just a formality of maintenance. She finished the routine, moved to the side table, and was filling out the medication chart, the pen gliding precisely in the time column. Her methodical silence, that unshakable discipline, was what Elijah aimed to dismantle with his next sentence, a social fencing thrust intended to remind her of her place. He cleared his throat lightly, the sound amplified by the silent acoustics of the suite. "Anya," he began, using her first name for the first time, but with an intonation that made it an insult. "I'm facing a terrible business dilemma. Absolutely catastrophic, you understand? Millions at stake, and frankly, my team of geniuses on Wall Street seems to have lost their way." He paused dramatically, a theatrical foreshadowing of what was to come, expecting her to lift her head, perhaps with a mix of curiosity and reverent dread. Anya didn't even hesitate. She continued writing, marking the next dosage. This lack of reaction irritated him further, injecting an extra dose of poison into the joke. He settled back, resting his head on the soft pillows. "So, I thought," he continued, letting the sarcasm drip from every syllable. "Who better to offer market insight than someone who sees life from the ground up? Someone who deals with real hard work? Anya, my dear nurse's assistant, please grace me with a bit of your financial wisdom. I have a private equity portfolio desperately in need of direction. What's your golden tip today? Should I bet on high-yield bonds or airline stocks? I'm all ears." The tone was unmistakably condescending, a cruel joke. The joke for Elijah was clear. The idea of a CNA, whose life revolved around thermometers and food trays, having anything useful to say about the world of complex finance, was a ridiculous hyperbole, worthy of corporate stand-up. He braced himself for the shy smile, the confused denial, or perhaps the offended glare. He craved the small victory of making her stumble. Anya finally stopped writing. She placed the pen beside the chart with a dry click and turned slowly, facing him not with anger or confusion, but with a serene and unexpected composure. Her eyes, which Elijah noticed for the first time, weren't just attentive. They were sharp, almost clinical, as if she were diagnosing him. "If you're serious about the catastrophic and losing your way, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice maintaining that professional tone, devoid of any unnecessary colloquialism, "I'd say it's not the time to be playing games with yield or volatile stocks. You should be more concerned about your exposure to structured investment vehicles, specifically the synthetic CDO hedges you use to mask long-term leverage." Anya then paused, the silence filling the room with a sudden thickness. She did not smile. She merely added, with the fatal calm of someone delivering a lab result, "The triangulation you described requires an immediate reassessment of counterparty risk. Otherwise, your catastrophe will cease to be hypothetical and become an event of structural insolvency." The phrase, uttered with a technical fluidity that seemed impossible coming from a CNA uniform, hit Elijah like a lightning bolt. It wasn't the joke that paralyzed him. It was the precision. Synthetic CDO hedge. This was a niche jargon term, a highly specialized financial instrument that was at the heart of Thorne Investments' most recent risk management strategy. It was the closely guarded secret that he and his CFO had debated exhaustively, and which he had arrogantly defended, even while feeling a chill down his spine about its vulnerability. The air was drained from Elijah's lungs. He was about to continue with the end of his joke, the punchline of his sarcasm being something like, "Or maybe I should just invest in compression socks, right, Anya?" But he couldn't complete it. His tongue muscles seized up, the phrase dying in his throat. He started, "Or maybe I should just invest in comp—" Absolute silence. His mouth remained half open. The smug smile collapsed, turning into a mask of icy shock. His eyes, always so controlled, widened minimally. He realized in a split second that Anya hadn't just repeated a term she'd heard on TV. She had pointed with surgical precision to the blind spot in the foundation of his empire. The irony was brutal and immediate. The millionaire, who tried to humiliate the nurse's assistant with a joke about finance, was silenced, interrupted mid-sentence, by a complex and devastating financial critique delivered by the one he deemed invisible. The latent stress from his illness, the worry he had been masking with arrogance, erupted like physical pain. He felt a sharp pang in his temple, and the fever he was trying to ignore seemed to shoot up 10 degrees. The luxury room spun for an instant. He wasn't just shocked, he was physically halted by the recognition that this woman not only knew what she was talking about, but that her casual tip was, in fact, a fatal warning about the strategic error he had stubbornly imposed on his company. He stared at her, searching for the source, the why of that knowledge. There was no arrogance in Anya, no triumph, just the calm look of someone who had completed a task, as if she were merely reporting vital signs. The now completed medication chart seemed an insignificant document beside the time bomb she had just triggered. Elijah Thorne was frozen, literally unable to finish the taunting sentence that would have redeemed him, because his mind was suddenly consumed by the urgency of the threat she had exposed. Anya waited, calmness reigning over the mental chaos she had provoked. To her, it was just a factual observation. To him, it was the crack in his crystal palace, and the question reverberating in his feverish mind wasn't, "Who is she?" but rather, "How deep does she see my mistake?" Anya was still there, standing, a few feet from the bed, the personification of quiet competence. For Elijah, however, the space between them had become an abyss, crossed only by the dangerous bridge of a high-level financial term. The unfinished sentence, "Or maybe I should just invest in comp," hung in the air like a ghost of his failed arrogance. He felt the flush of shame mingled with the heat of his feverish state, and this was almost as paralyzing as the sudden panic over the fate of his company. The silence that followed was not an empty silence. It was a minefield of unspoken thoughts, and the deafening sound of Elijah's pride shattering. The synthetic CDO hedge. He repeated the term in his mind. It wasn't something you learned from financial podcasts or popular articles. It was the coded language of the hedge fund elite. For a nurse's assistant to even know what this structure implied, let alone identify its inherent vulnerability, was as if the butler at Buckingham Palace were quoting quantum physics to the Queen. What had been a playful and cruel character test by Elijah had, in one devastating instant, turned into a test of his own competence and sanity. He had bet she was superficial. He had lost overwhelmingly. Anya, sensing the patient's inertia but misinterpreting its source, moved with the intention of checking his pulse, her expression reflecting only concern for his health. "Mr. Thorne, are you all right? Your pulse seems a bit rapid." The sound of her genuine concern, devoid of any hint of mockery, cut through the fog of his shock. He recoiled slightly, not wanting the physical contact that now felt like an invasion of his newfound vulnerability. He forced his throat to work, the sound raspy. "Don't change the subject. Where the hell did you learn that language?" He didn't even bother to maintain the polished veneer. His voice was urgent, almost desperate. He wasn't joking anymore. Anya stopped. She saw the shift. The mask of the bored millionaire dropped, revealing the strained face of the frightened executive. "It's just general knowledge, Mr. Thorne," she replied, trying to downplay it, wanting only to return to her safe routine. "General knowledge?" The laugh that escaped Elijah was bitter, almost hysterical. He sat up, pulling at the sheets with a sharp movement. The symbol of his status, the luxurious hospital room, now looked like a ridiculous opera stage where he was the sole clown. No one without a PhD in quantitative finance throws the term counterparty risk into a casual conversation, Anya. And I know you don't have a PhD. What's your game? He needed to rationalize. The only logical explanation for him, the financial genius, being blindsided by his nurse's assistant, was that she must be a spy, a saboteur, or involved in some elaborate wager. It was easier to accept the conspiracy than the failure of his own class perception. "I don't have a game, Mr. Thorne," she replied, turning back to the monitor, trying to create emotional distance. "My job is your health. And frankly, the way you look right now, strained, pale, and with this fever, tells me your real problem isn't your synthetic CDO hedge, but how you handle stress." This was a low blow, yet profoundly accurate. Elijah saw the truth in her eyes and felt the truth in his pounding veins. He had tried to use finance to humiliate her, and she was using his own health, his most vulnerable point, to hit back. The irony of the situation was now an electrical current. He sank back onto the bed, but his eyes, previously vacant, now burned with intense focus. He grabbed the remote control and pressed the privacy button on the door, a gesture of urgency and secrecy. "Don't you dare leave. You have 5 minutes to explain to me how you know that structure. And don't lie to me about podcasts or general knowledge." At this point, the reality of the strategic error, which he had been trying to ignore for days, hit him full force. The synthetic CDO hedge Anya had mentioned was crucial to a major investment he had made in a green energy company. His CFO, a conservative man, had raised red flags about the counterparty risk in case of an unexpected fluctuation in the Asian market. Elijah, in his stubbornness, had guaranteed the protection was bulletproof. The blind confidence in his own genius was what had put him in the hospital bed, exhausted and ill. And now it was a nurse's assistant who pointed to the heart of the problem. Anya sighed, a sound of resignation. She knew the calm was over. Elijah's vulnerability, though wrapped in demand, was real. The tension between the luxury of his past and the hard work environment of the present dissipated. In that moment, they were just two people connected by a dangerous financial secret. "You want the truth, Mr. Thorne?" she asked. She didn't challenge him, merely stated it. He nodded, his lips tight. "My father," she began, and the family mention brought a sudden humanity to her voice, "wasn't a trader or a banker. He was a bus driver. But he had one thing most of your wealthy colleagues did not: discipline and a fascination with complexity. He spent his nights reading. Not poetry, Mr. Thorne. He read Securities and Exchange Commission filings and macroeconomics textbooks. He taught me about derivatives before he taught me how to drive. He used to say money doesn't sleep, and if you don't understand how money does its dirty work, you'll always just be someone else's dirty work." The revelation was shocking in its simplicity. It was a story of effort, not privilege. A humble origin that countered all of Elijah's expectations. The nurse's assistant was not a spy. She was living proof that intelligence and knowledge could flourish in any environment, a brutal symbolism for the millionaire accustomed to buying talent. "He taught me about counterparty risk." Anya continued, her eyes fixed on a point beyond Elijah, traveling through time, saying you should never trust that the person on the other side of the counter has the same ethics or solidity as you. And he used the metaphor of the synthetic CDO. "It's like selling insurance against a fire in your own house. You make money now, but if the bet goes wrong, the whole neighborhood is affected. And the common man always pays the price." That was his lesson. Elijah was silent again, but this time it was the silence of absorption, not shock. Her story, the raw honesty, hit him hard. He wasn't just wrong about the market, he was wrong about her. And, crucially, Anya's tip didn't come from a rival analyst, but from a profound life lesson about social justice applied to macroeconomics. His arrogance had failed. The crack in his empire wasn't just financial, it was moral and personal. He knew he couldn't turn back now. The nurse's assistant, whom he thought was a piece of furniture, was the only one who could save his company from the mistake she had identified. The game had changed, and the millionaire was now in the position of a supplicant, trapped between panic and the desire to know more about the woman who held the key to his salvation. What would she do with this unexpected power? The story of Anya's father, the self-taught bus driver who dissected balance sheets in the faint light of the early morning, hung in the suite's air like an unexpected potent perfume, the raw scent of non-capitalist ambition. Elijah Thorne, accustomed to inheriting wealth and buying knowledge, was fascinated and at the same time profoundly uneasy. The honesty in her voice, devoid of any victimhood or empty pride, was more impactful than any business pitch he had ever heard. He wasn't just hearing a story, he was hearing the philosophy behind the blow she had just dealt to his arrogance. He leaned back again, but no longer with the attitude of a bored feudal lord. Now, He was a strategist who had just discovered an unexpected and extremely powerful chess piece. "Anya," he said, her name sounding more respectful, almost a question. "If your father gave you that foundation, if you understand the system with such clarity, why nursing? Why limit yourself to—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing the scarlet uniform and the medication tray. "To this? You could be on Wall Street. You could be earning 10 times more, without having to deal with the fever and the demands of sick idiots like me." The use of the term "sick idiots like me" was an unprecedented acknowledgement of his own fallibility, a small triumph for the intimate arc of the story. He was involuntarily opening up. Anya crossed her arms over her chest, the gesture subtly defensive. She knew this question was the real knot he needed to untangle to understand her. Her choice was the revealed secret that defined her moral compass. "My father taught me to understand money, so I would know how the system works," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "Not so I could be the system." His lesson wasn't about accumulation, it was about protection. He showed me that the most common way wealthy people use to control poor people is through health and debt. She walked toward the window, looking at the skyline Elijah had neglected, the symbolism of the city as a place of great fortunes and silent suffering. "I studied finance for 2 years in college. I was good. Excellent, actually. But I looked around and saw my classmates, children of bankers, heirs, talking about winning and crushing the competition. They saw people as numbers on a balance sheet. I saw my mother, a cleaner, having to choose between paying the rent and medicine for my grandfather." Her voice became lower, more laden with raw emotion. "When my father got sick, very sick, we didn't have the right health insurance. I saw the ugly side. I saw how the financial system turns into a social justice system that fails the most humble when they need it most. It's the opposite of what you do. My father always said, what saves a life isn't the amount in your account, it's the hand you reach out." Quick flashback, the fleeting image of her father, lying in a less luxurious hospital bed, with Anya, then a teenager, holding his rough hand. He smiles weakly. "Don't worry about Wall Street, daughter. Take care of what's real. Take care of people. Wall Street is about wealth. Nursing," she said, turning back to him, a look of unshakable conviction in her eyes, "is about value. I chose the front lines. I chose the place where money has no power, where a fever is a fever, regardless of whether you are a millionaire or a janitor. I chose raw humanity. I'd rather be the hand reaching out than the fist squeezing." Elijah Thorne absorbed this like a punch. He tried to find a hole in her logic, a sign of bitterness or resentment, but found only a quiet determination. He realized that Anya had made an ethical choice, not a limited choice. She wasn't less ambitious. The metric of her ambition was different. Her financial knowledge wasn't a tool to make money. It was a weapon of defense and a moral compass. "So, you're telling me you're here because of morality?" he questioned, the word sounding foreign in his mouth. "I'm here out of pragmatism," she corrected. "Someone has to care for the sick, Mr. Thorne. And if I have the insight into how great fortunes are built and undone, and I can use it to protect myself and those around me, I will. Nursing is my job. Finance is my hidden ability. And now, that hidden ability has just exposed a multi-million-dollar flaw in your business, hasn't it?" Her statement brought him back to the urgent reality. He looked at the screen of his tablet, which he had ignored for hours, and saw a flurry of encrypted notifications from his office. Anya's hint about the counterparty risk must be manifesting. "You're right," Elijah admitted, his voice low, his pride finally broken by necessity. "The crisis you predicted, it's starting. My CFO just sent me coded reports. The downturn in the Asian market hit our main contractor. The synthetic CDO hedge isn't enough. It's worse. It has made us vulnerable." He leaned forward, his body shaking slightly with fever and fear. The elegant posture vanished, replaced by the urgency of a man fighting for his financial survival. He, the man who commanded armies of lawyers and analysts, was now pleading for help from someone he had tried to ridicule minutes earlier. "Anya, you have to help me," he said, the honesty in his tone unprecedented. "If this strategy fails, it's not just my company that sinks. The consequences spread. The wager involves pension funds, public investments. Your father was right. The common man pays the price. And I'll be the one to force them to pay, unless I can reverse this. He appealed to her moral compass, a desperate strategic move. The nurse's assistant, who had chosen the path of social justice, was now the only barrier between him and moral and financial failure. What you're asking is illegal, Mr. Thorne. I am a CNA, not your risk consultant. Anya took a step back, the seriousness of the situation hitting her. She was being pulled into her old world, into a high-stakes game she had deliberately avoided. I'm not asking you to trade, Elijah countered, hope lit in his eyes. I'm asking for an insight, an external analysis. I'm here, sick and trapped, my team is stuck in the same mindset that caused this. You are the only person with the knowledge and the moral distance to see the puzzle. Think of it as saving the common men you care about. The temptation was powerful, a chance to use her hidden ability exactly as her father intended, as a force for good. The hospital was a resuscitation area for lives. Ironically, Elijah's room became a resuscitation area for a financial empire. Anya looked at the lit tablet in his trembling hand. She saw the fear in the millionaire's eyes. She knew she held the power. The next move would be hers, and it would dictate whether she would save just one patient or the financial fate of hundreds of common men. What price would she charge for her assistance, and would he be willing to pay? The gravity of the moment weighed on Anya, more than the heaviest supply tray. Elijah Thorne, the man she had seen disdain the outside world through the tempered glass, was now there, his forehead sweating from fever and fear, pleading for her help. His vulnerability was a metaphor for the fragility of the entire financial system, strong in appearance, but prone to collapse under the pressure of human error and greed. He had appealed directly to her sense of social justice, a desperate and cunning move. By framing the financial rescue as a way to protect pension funds and the common men, the very class her father had taught her to defend, Elijah had struck the right chord. It was a trap, she knew, but it was also the opportunity her revealed secret had created. A chance to use her financial knowledge, not to get rich, but to correct the error of a Wall Street titan and perhaps prove her father's philosophy. Anya stepped away from the window and returned to the bedside, her expression now calm and determined. Elijah's panic was the oxygen for her new power. She was no longer an assistant, she was an unexpected negotiator. You're right, Mr. Thorne. The consequences ripple out. Your father, mine, and millions of others are always the ones who foot the bill in the end, she said, her voice low, but carrying an authority that came from truth, not title. And you, the person who created the vulnerability, are too sick to fix it. That's pure irony. Elijah nodded, impatient. Anya, I'm offering whatever it takes. Name your price. A blank check. I can make you a consultant. 6 figures. Just tell me how to reverse the counterparty risk before the market opens in New York. Time is the enemy. The offer of money, the immediate temptation she had rejected when she traded the cubicle for the uniform, only strengthened her resolve. Accepting the check would make her part of the system she criticized. I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne, she replied, making Elijah's heart skip a beat with the rejection. He couldn't conceive of someone turning down millions. If you think my moral compass is for sale, you haven't learned anything from my father's story. He frowned, confused and exasperated. Then what do you want? Say it. Demand something. Power? A position? Anya pulled a visitor's chair and dragged it close to the bed, sitting down. It was a gesture of control, of unrequested equality. She was settling in for negotiation, turning the hospital room into a makeshift war table. I want a wager, she declared, and the word hung in the air with the weight of a contract. You want my market insight? I'll give it. But in return, you must submit to a non-negotiable character test. Elijah hesitated, suspicious. What test? Be direct. First, you must give me unrestricted access, on the record, to all the information I request. Ledger, filings, encrypted reports. I will report only to you. And if my analysis solves your problem, if we save your company, and by extension, the innocent pension funds, you will not pay me. She looked him in the eyes, the intensity of her gaze pinning him to the bed. You will make a massive, irrevocable donation to St. Jude's Hospital, Not for the new luxury wing or the Thorne family name on the wall, Anya stressed, her voice deepening, but for the Underserved Patient Assistance Fund, UPAF. The fund that pays for the unexpected costs, transportation, specialized medication, home equipment, for the humble patients who, like my father, don't have the right insurance or the money you have. Elijah was speechless. Silence returned. But this time, it was a silence of calculation. Anya didn't want a bribe. She wanted redistributive justice, a direct reversal of his initial arrogance. She was asking him to use his vast wealth to remedy the systemic failure her father had experienced. "How much is massive?" he asked, his voice strained, testing the limit. "Enough to hurt," she replied with cold irony. "Enough for you to feel the weight of the choice you're making. I'd say, the full value of your year-end bonus. From what I've read about Thorne Investments' earnings last quarter, that would be more than the hospital has seen in combined donations in the last 5 years." The amount was astronomical, the equivalent of a penance. It was a symbol that the rescue of his company would come, not from his own brilliance, but from the ethics of a nurse's assistant. The price was his pride and a significant chunk of his personal wealth. "What if I refuse? What if I manage to reverse this alone?" Elijah tried one last power move. Anya smiled, a small, strained smile, devoid of joy. "You're feverish, exhausted, and trapped. You need a fresh perspective, and you need it now. You're betting against time, Mr. Thorne. And if you reverse this alone, fine. But if you use my analysis, the analysis that has already proven correct, to save your empire, the deal is sealed. I won't be your paid consultant. I will be the witness to your character test." The urgency of the market, the risk of structural insolvency she had foreseen, pressed Elijah. He looked at the tablet trembling in his hands. Another encrypted notification. He no longer had time to debate morality or price. He needed Anya. He swallowed hard, choking down the bitterest part of his arrogance. The air in the room seemed thin. "Done," he growled, the word coming out with the difficulty of a forced oath. "The wager is on. You have access. The Underserved Patient Assistance Fund gets my bonus, if you save me." Anya nodded, her calm returning. She stood up. "Then, the game begins. Rule number 1. Your health is paramount. Without your clear mind, all the hedge in the world won't help. I am your nurse's assistant first, and your risk analyst second. Now, hand me that tablet and the password to your terminal. Let's see how deep this hole goes." Elijah, the titan of Wall Street, extended the tablet to the nurse's assistant. The screen of the tablet, which used to display stock charts and currency quotes, was now the tool that sealed an improbable and dangerous alliance. The luxury hospital room had ceased to be a prison and had been transformed into a war headquarters, and the nurse's assistant he had mocked was, suddenly, the sole general. But the greatest danger for Elijah wasn't the market. It was the forced, growing intimacy with Anya's morality and courage. What would he do when the financial battle ended and the real confrontation, the confrontation with his own character, began? Elijah's handover of the tablet to Anya was an act of silent yet total surrender. It was as if he were passing the crown of his empire into the hands of a figure he had, minutes earlier, considered part of the furniture. Anya took the device with the same dexterity with which she held an infusion needle, the coolness of the aluminum and glass contrasting with the warmth of her uniform. She quickly typed in the provided access credentials, and the presidential suite was transformed, in effect, into a makeshift war table. The irony of the situation was palpable. The fate of billions of dollars and the stability of pension funds for common men were now being decided by a nurse's assistant sitting next to a feverish patient. Anya's first action was pragmatic, reflecting her dual role. "Dr. Peterson needs to be informed that you will have a period of mandatory rest and mental concentration for the next 48 hours. No interruptions, except for medical emergencies or the medications I administer. Your other shift nurses and assistants will be informed that Mr. Thorne is in a critical recovery phase that requires absolute seclusion." She was using the hospital rules as her own protective wall to create the necessary secrecy. Elijah watched, fascinated. He expected a motivational speech or a market bluff analysis, but she was starting with access control logistics. She was setting the stage, and he was, at that moment, a resource to be managed. "What about my team?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "My CFO, Marcus Vane. He's the only one with the master key to the crisis." Anya, without taking her eyes off the tablet, which now displayed complex graphs and lines of financial code, replied with surgical precision. "Marcus Vane, your right-hand man for 15 years. The man who raised the red flag about the excessive leverage of the synthetic CDO hedge. You ignored him, right?" Elijah narrowed his eyes. "He has an old-fashioned mind, Anya. He's risk-averse. He's prudent," she corrected dryly. "And he's stuck in the same mindset of your failure. You can't bring him here. You need someone who has no skin in the game, who isn't emotionally or financially tied to the mistake. That's why you chose me, Mr. Thorne. Your team is trapped in the symbolism of your wealth. I am not." She looked down at her own scarlet uniform. "I am trapped in the symbol of real work." She then plunged into the data, and the intensity with which she did so was striking. She was fast, but not frantic. Every scroll, every click, was deliberate. She began to vocalize the situation, but not for him. It was an analytical verbalization, a process of thinking aloud. "What I said is worse than you imagined. The counterparty risk isn't just the insolvency of the Green Power Alliance. It's the interlinking of that insolvency with the municipal bonds that GPA used as collateral. If the bonds drop, the collateral for your hedge evaporates. Their composite risk index is at 7.4. This isn't a downturn, it's an imminent collapse." Anya's use of complex financial jargon seemed natural now. Elijah lay there, listening to the nurse's assistant diagnose the terminal illness of his empire, with the same calmness she would have used to diagnose his fever. The metaphor of the hospital and the market merged. The suite was not just the site of his physical recovery, but the deathbed of his arrogant strategy. He tried to intervene. "I knew about the municipal bonds, but the spread wasn't—" "The spread is widening because someone is leaking information to your direct competitors," Anya interrupted him, without preamble. She turned the tablet to him, pointing to an anomaly in the transaction records. "See this trade here, 48 hours before your diagnosis and the Asian crisis. A massive sale of short positions in a fund that is the principal creditor of GPA. It was done through an offshore shell corporation linked to an IP that traces back to a residence in Greenwich, Connecticut. Someone in your orbit knew what was coming, Mr. Thorne. Someone betrayed you. And that someone is profiting from your illness and your mistake." The revelation of a silent betrayal injected a new layer of urgency and paranoia. It wasn't just a strategic error, it was an internal conspiracy. The crisis had a face. Elijah felt a wave of fury mixed with nausea. He felt violated, attacked in his most vulnerable place. A traitor. But who? Who has the codes? Only Marcus, myself, and the board. "Don't worry about the who right now," Anya commanded, reverting to her professional nursing tone, but still looking at the tablet. "Worry about the what. We need to stop the bleeding. The traitor is betting you're too sick and distracted to respond in time. We need a move that's unexpected, and doesn't require you to be physically present on Wall Street. We need an outsider genius blow." She stood up abruptly, placing the tablet on a side table, where it continued to glow with charts and threats. She turned back to Elijah. "First order. You have 10 minutes to call your lawyer and trustee. Say you are temporarily transferring custody of a significant portion of your liquid assets, say a third, to a blind trust that you will name. This is not to solve the crisis. It's to show your competitors and your traitor that you can still move mountains even while lying down. It's a misdirection of perception. Their fear will buy us time." Elijah was dumbfounded. It wasn't a financial tip, it was a move of power and psychology. And it was brilliant. The nurse's assistant, the outsider, had immediately seen the internal game of Wall Street. Anya then took up her primary function. She picked up the medication tray. "And the second order. You will take these antibiotics and this muscle relaxer. You are shaking. You need sleep, Mr. Thorne. You can't negotiate if you're half dead. I will wake you before the Asian market closes for our next move." He looked at the medication, then at the tablet, then at her. She was the guardian of his health and his fortune. The submission to her authority was complete. "Anya," he said, almost a whisper, "do you really think we can do this in time?" She looked at him with the calm of someone who has dealt with countless life-or-death situations. "In the hospital, Mr. Thorne, we don't think. We do. Now drink this. Time is precious, and we are on the clock." Elijah swallowed the medication, feeling the weight of sleep and fear. As he was dragged into the darkness, he knew he wasn't just trusting his empire to a stranger. He was handing over the key to his character to a woman who operated on a completely different metric of value. The traitor was watching, and Anya was the only obstacle. But would the pressure of being the guardian of $1 billion secret take its toll on her too? Night settled over Manhattan, but in the presidential suite, the darkness was only a superficial layer. Elijah was asleep, sedated by medication and exhaustion. His sleep, monitored by Anya, was the only truce in the financial war she was now fighting on his behalf. The cold glow of Elijah's high-security tablet illuminated her face, capturing the tension beneath her normally calm expression. Anya sat in the visitor's chair, the vital signs monitor beside her, the tablet in her hands. She had become the most improbable link between the intensive care wing and Wall Street. Her dual loyalty was an emotional and professional tightrope walk. Every 20 minutes, she checked the patient's status. Temperature, still elevated. Pulse, slower but stable. Respiration. Every 10 minutes, she delved into Thorne Investments' coded files, searching for the face behind the short sale designed to sink the Green Power Alliance and, consequently, Elijah's empire. The blind trust maneuver she had orchestrated had an immediate effect. The competitors' initial panic had turned into confusion. They didn't know if Elijah was selling or restructuring. The uncertainty bought time, but Anya knew it was a distraction tactic, not a solution. The traitor's enigma consumed her attention. She was using her father's logic. Who profits from the chaos? The Greenwich IP was the hottest clue, and she used Elijah's platform, a platform that cost more than most startups, to cross-reference access data. She wasn't just looking for the name. She was looking for a behavioral pattern. She quickly ruled out most board members. They were too wealthy, too visible. The traitor needed deep access, but anonymity. Her eyes focused on one profile. Marcus Vane, the CFO Elijah had dismissed as old-fashioned. Vane had full access and knew the exact vulnerability of the synthetic CDO hedge because he had warned Elijah about it. He was perfectly positioned to profit from the collapse. Anya felt a pang of suspicion. Was it too obvious? She searched for more subtle evidence, using the knowledge her father had instilled in her about the psychology of accumulation. People who engage in betrayal for money rarely hide all their tracks. She discovered a suspicious micro-pattern of spending in corporate accounts linked to Vane. High-luxury cash purchases that didn't match his declared salary and bonus. They weren't massive enough expenses to raise a formal alarm, but they were the foreshadowing of unexplained liquidity. The money was new. The money came from somewhere. And the date of the purchases coincided with the increase in short positions against GPA. The personification of the betrayal, which was previously just a Greenwich IP, began to materialize as Marcus Vane, the loyal CFO. His loyalty had transformed into silent resentment and, finally, into calculated greed. As the adrenaline of discovery drove her, the strain of her nursing work began to show. She had to maintain the medication schedule. The dim light of the room and the symbolism of the scarlet uniform reminded her where she truly belonged. In one moment, while changing Elijah's IV drip, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The exhaustion was physical, but the mental pressure was overwhelming. She was immersed in a multi-million-dollar game, with her father's morality as her only compass, while simultaneously caring for the life of a man who had mocked her. The line between care and war was becoming dangerously thin. She had to be creative to maintain dual loyalty. When a fellow nurse's assistant, Sarah, entered to check on the patient, Anya acted with calculated coolness. "Mr. Thorne has had a particularly rough night with the stress of his illness. Dr. Peterson ordered seclusion to prevent sensory overload. I am monitoring him closely. Please keep the staff area informed that only I should enter." She was building a wall of professional protection that, to others, looked like excessive zeal, but to Anya was essential for maintaining the secrecy of the war table. However, the pressure began to affect her judgment. When Elijah briefly woke up, pale and confused, and asked for water, Anya, still mentally absorbed in the leverage charts, took a few seconds longer to respond. a small lapse that would have been unthinkable in her normal work. The tension between the luxury of his past and the hard work environment of the present was no longer about Elijah. It was about her and the rift in her own life. The risk now wasn't just financial. If Anya were caught using Elijah's terminal, she would lose her license. She would be charged with fraud or espionage. She was risking the career she chose for moral reasons to save the man who represented everything she rejected. The price of her character test wasn't just Elijah's bonus. It was her own integrity and future. She realized she needed final confirmation of Vane's involvement, but in a way that wouldn't alert him. She needed a tactical move that would force him to act, confirming her suspicion. Anya turned back to the tablet, her eyes fixed on Thorn Investments' composite risk index, which continued to climb. Vane had devised a plan that would only fail if Thorn made an unexpected move. Anya had the unexpected move in mind. She approached Elijah, who was about to drift back to sleep. She leaned in, her voice now an urgent whisper. "Mr. Thorn, I found a pattern. It's Vane. He's our traitor. But to catch him, we need a controlled distraction. I'm going to release a false rumor on the Asian market about a strategic asset sale. He will act. He will try to block it. And that's when we catch him. But for this to work, you have to give me the authority to use your voice. You must electronically sign this executive contact authorization." Elijah, half asleep, could barely focus, but the word Vane hit him. The shock of the betrayal briefly revived him. He took the electronic pen, his fingers hesitant, but the urgency in Anya's eyes convinced him. He scrawled his signature on the screen. Anya now held the authority of a CEO. She had obtained the signature under the shadow of illness and betrayal. A moment of absolute power. The game had become imminent and personal. She was about to cast the lure on the market and expose the betrayal, but the pressure on her dual loyalty threatened to make her crumble. Would she be able to maintain professional calm while orchestrating the downfall of a Wall Street CFO? The clock was the relentless enemy. Early in the New York morning, the close of the Asian market and the opening of the European ones, Anya's plan was activated. Using the executive contact authority Elijah had signed while feverish, Anya released the controlled rumor. Thorn Investments was preparing for a strategic liquidation of smaller assets to realign capital, ahead of a major acquisition. The news, though false, was plausible, and caused exactly the kind of misdirection of perception Anya intended. However, the side effect was immediate and brutal. The market reacted with a nervous dance of caution, but the trader, Marcus Vane, reacted with calculated panic. Anya's move threatened to unravel the profitability of Vane's short positions. Vane tried to counter. He used his own channels to refute the information, hinting that the news was a sign of desperation due to Elijah's illness. He made a subtle move. He doubled down on his short sales, confident that Elijah's sickness made him too slow to fight back in time. The composite risk index on Elijah's tablet screen skyrocketed. The trader's fear had turned into desperate aggression. The external pressure was no longer an abstract threat. It was a targeted attack that now amplified Elijah's original mistake. The municipal bonds tied to the Green Power Alliance plummeted under the weight of the panic sales orchestrated by Vane. Elijah woke to the silent alarm on the tablet, the fever seemingly having settled in with a vengeance. His body was drenched in sweat and his mind was clouded, but he instantly knew something catastrophic had happened. "What? What is happening?" he gasped, struggling to sit up. Anya, who was finishing filling out a medical chart, turned, her expression tense but still controlled. "Vane took the bait, Mr. Thorn. He doubled down, but his counterattack was stronger than I anticipated. He used the news of your illness to create a perfect storm of panic. We are in an imminent crisis." She showed him the screen. The value of the synthetic CDO hedge was plummeting, and Thorn Investments' liquidity was draining at an alarming rate. The metaphor of Elijah's body was now that of his empire: internal bleeding and high fever, a race against time before bankruptcy became official. The sight of the free-falling numbers broke the rest of Elijah's composure. He tried to get out of bed, determined to call the board, but his muscles failed him. He collapsed back onto the sheets, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The physical exhaustion, combined with the financial panic, hit him with the force of a punch. I can't lose this. Not GPA. That was supposed to be my legacy," he whispered. and in his voice there was no arrogance, just the fragility of a child. His eyes, which were once cold and calculating, were now filled with the unshed tears of frustration and pain. Anya caught him in a moment of utter vulnerability. The millionaire Thorne, the man who commanded Wall Street, was physically and emotionally collapsing in his hospital bed. "Mr. Thorne, look at me," Anya commanded, her voice firm but with a hint of professional compassion. She knelt by the bed, placing her hand on his wrist to check his heart rate. Her touch was different now. It wasn't just clinical but charged with the tension of their secret alliance. "You are having a panic attack. Your fever is high. If you don't calm down, your body will give out. And if your body gives out, Vane wins. Is that what you want?" She wasn't scolding him. She was using the urgency of the situation to anchor him to reality. "I can't. It's too much. The mistake. The betrayal. It's Marcus. I trusted him for 15 years. He mumbled, the words slurred. "I trusted him more than I trusted my own family, my father. My father warned me about this. He said greed would blind me, that I would only see the number, not the person." In a rare moment of intimate vulnerability, Elijah revealed to Anya the true pain behind his arrogance. He had betrayed himself and the legacy of integrity his own father, the elder Thorne, the founder, had tried to instill. The illness was not just physical. It was the personification of his failure to honor his father's values. He looked at Anya, his nurse's assistant, and now his sole confidant and war general. "My illness. They can't find the cause. But I know," he confessed, his voice breaking. "It's the stress. The stress of knowing, deep down, that I bet against prudence and against honesty. I forced myself to ignore the risk, and now my body is forcing me to stop. Vane is just the symptom. I am the disease, Anya. I am the structural flaw." The confession was a plea for absolution, not for financial help. Anya saw the man beneath the silk suit, the heir who was carrying the weight of a dynasty and an ethical failure. Her nursing empathy mingled with her financial strategist ethics. "The structural flaw can be fixed," she said, her hand remaining firm on his wrist, offering a rare comfort. "Your mistake was trying to do everything alone. Vane's mistake was betting you would die before the truth came out. But you won't. Not today. We have time for one tactical move before the Europeans close and Wall Street starts debating your insolvency." She stood up. The moment of intimacy had passed, replaced by urgency. She picked up the tablet. "Now, you will take your sedative. I will give you 5 minutes of rest," she said, her voice returning to the professional command cadence. "In the meantime, I will make a move he will never see coming. Vane is so focused on taking us down that he is vulnerable to a flanking attack, using an instrument that neither he nor the board would expect you or me to use." Anya knew the next move was risky. She could no longer use subterfuge. It had to be a direct move, a stroke of genius that would only work because it came from an unexpected source. She was about to use her hidden knowledge to turn Elijah's structural flaw into his greatest leverage. Elijah's body relaxed under the effect of the sedative, but his eyes, fixed on her, reflected a new form of dependence. Not just dependence on his health, but dependence on her moral compass. Anya, however, was on the verge of exhaustion. She needed the checkmate, and she needed it now, before her own strength to fight disappeared. She would make the move, and the market's response would be the final proof of her plan and Vane's character. Elijah succumbed to the sedative, falling into a restless sleep. The suite was silent, except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the furious clicking of Anya's fingers on the tablet. She had a window of only 3 hours before Marcus Vane's aggression became irreversible, dragging pension funds and municipal bonds into the abyss, exactly as her father had warned about systemic risks. The pressure was a physical weight, a personification of the broken system she was trying to fix single-handedly. Anya had had her intimate confession. Now she needed her strategic victory. Vane was betting that Elijah was paralyzed by his illness and trapped in the synthetic CDO hedge mindset. He expected a defensive move. Anya, however, would use the very nature of Elijah's mistake as leverage. Elijah's mistake was overestimating the security of his hedge and underestimating Vane's greed. Anya's move would not be a direct defense. It would be a flanking attack, utilizing a financial instrument so archaic and out of fashion on Wall Street that no one would expect it. The reverse contingent equity swap. Vane is focused on the fall of municipal bonds to bankrupt GPA and detonate our hedge, Anya murmured to the monitor, verbalizing her strategy. But what Vane doesn't know is that reverse swaps can be collateralized, not by liquid cash, but by illiquid intellectual property. GPA has green energy patents that are worth much more than their current bonds. They are intrinsic value assets. She typed commands frantically, using Elijah's authority. She didn't call bankers or the trading desk. She triggered an obscure emergency protocol, which Elijah had forgotten, that allowed a direct peer-to-peer transaction between Thorn Investments and Green Power Alliance under the guise of an emergency debt restructuring. The essence of the move was ingenious. Thorn Investments would not bail out GPA with cash, but by issuing a reverse contingent equity swap collateralized by GPA's green technology patents. This would flood the market with the perception that GPA had found a new way to leverage its value, bypassing the bond liquidity crisis. The move was checkmate. In less than 5 minutes, the news, carefully leaked by Anya through a niche financial newsletter, hit terminals in London and Hong Kong. The municipal bond market, which had been in freefall, suddenly halted. Investors saw the news of the intellectual property-backed restructuring and, sensing GPA's future growth potential, began to reverse the panic selling. The composite risk index on Elijah's screen began to drop as rapidly as it had risen. The bleeding had stopped. Mid-morning in New York, Marcus Vane, in his elegant meeting room with a stunning view, was ecstatic, watching his short positions peak. He was about to finalize the rescue of his personal fortune when his terminal flashed. The reverse contingent equity swap. Vane froze. He recognized the instrument. It was a strategy he and Elijah had dismissed years earlier as too slow and bulletproof against speculative bailouts. The only way this move could have been authorized was if Elijah was completely sound of mind, or had given total authority to someone who thought outside the Wall Street game. Worse, the swap created a legal firewall around GPA's patents, making it impossible for Vane to continue profiting from the bond collapse. Vane tried to call Thorn, but Anya's seclusion protocol blocked all direct communications with Elijah. Desperate, Vane committed his final error. He violated board rules by attempting a massive insider trade, a last-ditch attempt to lock down the swap in its early phase. He bet that the hospital bureaucracy would delay Elijah, but Vane didn't know that Anya had programmed a surveillance script. The moment Vane attempted the illegal move, Elijah's tablet issued an alert. Anya quickly typed a command line, activating the revelation protocol. An encrypted message, containing the audit trail of Vane's micro-patterns of spending, the Greenwich IP, and the final insider trade order, was instantly sent to the Thorn Investments Ethics Board and the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. "Checkmate, Mr. Vane," Anya whispered. Elijah woke up at that exact moment. He was dizzy, but the fever had slightly subsided, and the sedative was wearing off. He saw Anya's exhausted face, but her eyes shone with contained victory. He looked at the tablet. The composite risk index was back to safe levels. The crisis had been reversed. "What happened?" he asked, his voice still weak. "We won, Mr. Thorn," she said, the exhaustion evident in her voice. The leverage he used to bring us down was his own downfall. The reverse contingent equity swap made Vane commit his final mistake, and he just exposed himself to the SEC. He tried to block the move. His betrayal is exposed. Elijah absorbed the news. The relief of saving his empire was less potent than the wave of late recognition that hit him. He looked at Anya, the nurse's assistant, the bus driver's daughter, the strategist who used an archaic financial instrument to combat modern greed. She had saved him from financial ruin and, more importantly, from his own ethical short-sightedness. You used my father's logic against his," Elijah said, a tear tracing a path down his feverish temple. A tear not of illness, but of profound gratitude and redemption. Vane only thought of immediate gain. You saw the intrinsic value. He reached out his hand, not the businessman, but the man who was sick and rescued. "Anya, I wouldn't have seen that in a million years. You saved me, and you saved my father's legacy." Anya, for a brief moment, squeezed his hand. The touch this time was mutual, a seal of the alliance. You saved yourself, Mr. Thorne, she gently corrected. You gave me the key. And now, the wager needs to be fulfilled. The financial confrontation was over, but the tension between them was higher than ever. Elijah's gratitude was a precipice, and Anya's demand was a call to moral action. What would happen now that the character test had been passed and the multi-million debt was in effect? Would the forced intimacy end when the work was done? Or would the millionaire finally see the strength and value beyond the nursing uniform? Morning turned into afternoon. The market in New York opened with the overwhelming news. The CFO of Thorne Investments, Marcus Vane, had been detained by the SEC, and the risk of bankruptcy had evaporated due to an ingenious, legacy-preserving debt restructuring. Elijah Thorne's name was once again synonymous with invincibility, though the truth resided in his hospital bed. Anya had spent the following hours monitoring the financial news and, crucially, stabilizing Elijah. His fever subsided, the nausea disappeared, and the cold, ruthless Elijah Thorne began to return. But with a subtle difference, a new wrinkle of humility beneath the formerly arrogant gaze. Dr. Peterson made his rounds, and seeing the dramatic improvement, discharged Elijah on the condition of home rest. When Anya returned to the suite, it was for her last action as his nurse's assistant and war general. She removed her profile access from the tablet, cleared the bedside table, leaving only the medical charts, and meticulously folded the sheets. The room was returning to being just a hospital room. Elijah, dressed in a silk robe Anya had managed to retrieve, sat on the edge of the bed. He watched her with an intensity she had never seen. There was no condescension. There was study, final recognition. The reverse swap stabilized GPA and saved the workers' pension fund, he said, his voice now strong. You saved me from being the joke and the villain. My team is finalizing Vane's termination. The crisis is over, Anya. You won. The character test is complete. And now, the wager. He took a small leather folder his lawyer had delivered and opened it. I don't know what your father taught you about contract execution, but a Thorne always pays his debts. He handed her a sealed envelope. It's a fund transfer. $30 million. The bonus, plus an amount for the moral risk and your discretion. It's more than enough for you and your father to live without working. Anya accepted the envelope. Instead of opening it, she placed it aside, on top of the switched-off vital signs monitor. A symbol that she valued professionalism above money. I appreciate the financial recognition, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice calm and professional, the nurse's assistant mask firmly in place. But the price of honesty is not $30 million. That money, if I accepted it, would make me what you and Vane became, hostages to greed. I would become an insider who profited from chaos. My father taught me to have skin in the game differently, loyalty to intrinsic value, not price. Elijah was dumbfounded. He had anticipated negotiation, perhaps a job request, but not a moral rejection of his money. Then, what do you want? He asked, genuinely confused. Anya looked at him, and for a moment, the outsider asserted herself over the insider. I want you to fulfill the wager on your own terms. You must prove to me that you are not your money. You showed me your empire. Now show me your character. She picked up the tablet and typed something, turning it toward him. It wasn't financial data, but a blueprint. I found a vulnerability, Mr. Thorne. Not in the market, but in your charitable foundation, Thorne Philanthropic. It has millions, but the bureaucracy and lack of on-the-ground focus make it ineffective. Your legacy is being wasted on administrative costs. I want the $30 million, but not for me. I want you to use it to create a new division within Thorne Philanthropic, a direct impact mission focused on municipal bonds to guarantee health and education in low-income communities in Manhattan. It's a full circle. You almost went bankrupt because of speculative municipal bonds. Now you will redeem yourself through charitable municipal bonds. Anya continued, revealing her new mission. I want the money to be used to hire a small team of former nurse assistants and social workers, people who know what real work is, and give them the authority to cut through bureaucracy and ensure the money goes where it is needed most. People who think like me, Mr. Thorne. I want you to use your wealth to correct the structural flaw of your own philanthropy. Elijah looked at the screen. Anya had drafted a cleaner, more ethical financial plan for his charity than any of his consultants. It was the final stroke of genius, a moral one. A slow, genuine smile, something Anya had never seen, spread across Elijah's face. He picked up the electronic pen and, instead of signing, looked at her. "And who would I put in charge of leading this division? Someone who understands the logic of the reverse contingent swap and the medication protocol," he said. Anya replied with a calm gaze. "I cannot accept a job, Mr. Thorne. I am a nurse's assistant. That is where I belong. My license is my code of ethics." Elijah nodded, the final understanding settling in. He had finally grasped the true price of honesty. "Then, Anya, what you ask of me is a transfer of purpose, not a transfer of money. I accept. The 30 million will be the initial endowment for the Anya division of Thorne Philanthropic." He took the envelope back, tore it up, throwing it into the hospital trash can. "Don't worry. I know exactly who I will hire to lead the team. And I know who I will call to tell me how to do it. Once a week, Anya, you will receive an emergency call from Elijah Thorne. Not about your health, but about the health of my foundation." He held out his hand again. This time, the handshake was between equals. "Thank you, Anya. You were the best nurse, and the best strategist I've ever had." "It was a pleasure, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her professional mask finally breaking into a small smile. She helped him into his coat, handing him over to his security team waiting outside. As she watched Elijah Thorne, the man she scorned yet saved, leave the suite not as an arrogant millionaire, but as a man who had just been forced to see the value of work and ethics in a completely new way, Anya felt a profound relief. She had rescued not only an empire, but, perhaps, the soul of a man. She picked up the clipboard with the chart of her next patient, an ordinary anonymous patient, and headed into the hallway, knowing that although she had refused the millions, she had won something infinitely more valuable, the chance to use the power of Wall Street to correct the world's structural flaws while remaining true to her scarlet uniform. The alliance was over, but the new mission had just begun.